Well, I have big news. I just went to see a new movie in a theater. It's crazy, right?
Are you familiar with these parts of the frontier?
Not with this part. Not yet.
So I just saw a new movie from a director whose name I can't pronounce, but he's a director I like. He's directed movies like Embrace of the Serpent and most recently Birds of Passage, which was on my 2019 best of list. It was a great little movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. And so when I saw Waiting for the Barbarians screening at a local theater, I decided to go check it out to see the first movie that I've seen in theaters since The Hunt back in February, I want to say. But I saw this movie and I like it. It's not a movie that I can recommend to very many people though, which is the unfortunate part about it. This is a movie that is for a very specific, tiny, almost minuscule audience. I didn't see this alone. I saw it with 3 other people who all sat down 2 rows from me and were not wearing face masks, of course. And when they left, they pretty much unanimously agreed that they didn't like it. And the oddest part about it was throughout the whole movie, they all left at least 2 to 3 times, but not at the same time. They'd all leave one at a time. It was the most bizarre thing watching them. And like, I was trying to get into the movie, and I was into the movie, but occasionally I just see one of them get up and leave, and I'd be like, what's going on? So this isn't a movie for a general audience, and I completely realize that. Mainly because A, it's almost intolerably slow at points, and B, nothing happens. This is one of those movies that people are gonna come out and say, it's boring, nothing happens. It's one of those. And for people that want to be absorbed in a world, to be absorbed in a movie that is taking a lot of time to set things up, this will work for you. And it worked for me. I like this one quite a bit, even though I think that it runs not even 2 hours long, and I still feel like 15 to 20 minutes could be cut out or down, because the first hour or so is simply establishing the conflict that comes into play in the second half of the movie. It is kind of a tale of 2 halves, even though it's segmented in 4 sections. So it's an odd movie, to say the least. And if you don't know what it is going into it, you're not going to like it, and I will personally guarantee that. In this time of the coronavirus and not getting out of one's house, you want to see something. And there's not much in theaters that's new, and this is playing, and I could see a lot of people just saying, whatever, I don't care what it is, I just want to go see something. And then they go see this.
Just a minute. Let me speak with them. I know little of the language.
And for what it is, I quite liked it. It's a simple movie, it's a simple premise with very simple characters, but it does a lot in that space, which is sort of what Embrace of the Serpent is. From what I remember, I barely remember anything about it. I saw it one time, and I didn't watch it in an environment where I could really focus on it. And then that was very similar to Birds of Passage as well. It's kind of a simple premise that just keeps building on itself, and that's what Waiting for the Barbarians is. It's basically a movie about Mark Rylance, who is a administrator on this final frontier type of place. It's sort of the first line of defense against barbarians for this empire, some empire. And he and his people that live there are very peaceful and very happy. There's nothing wrong. And then Johnny Depp, the colonel of this one of this empire, people will come in and they ruin it, essentially. That's pretty much the plot of this movie. A happy place is disturbed by an outside force, and Mark Rylance is sort of in the center of it. He is almost like a Jesus type of figure. He's always doing the moral or ethically correct thing, and even though he's frequently right, he pays great costs for that. And that is the most compelling aspect of this movie, is his character and the thematics of it.
I have orders to obey. I'm speaking of particular situations. Situations where I am probing for the truth. Since all is not well here, I expect further measures will be taken.
Outside of the look of the movie, which is gorgeous, the cinematography is absolutely stunning, there isn't a whole lot to latch onto outside of Mark Rylance and the thematics of the movie, especially because the story doesn't build very quickly, and when it does build, it doesn't build to anything bombastic. Like in Birds of Passage, there are scenes when explosive things happen, but this is a very quiet, a very subtle movie that people, if you don't focus on it, are not going to understand. And I understand that. Like, the theme is stated very on in the movie, though. Mark Rylance is talking with some guy about the Colonel, Johnny Depp, coming in, and he says, the Empire, or any government for that matter, is uncomfortable when there is too much ease, when there's too much peace. Governments get uncomfortable because they feel like it's the calm before the storm, so they have to try and figure out what's gonna happen. And that's essentially the ideas and the thematics presented in this movie that I think work pretty well and are fleshed out in a very nice way. The majority of the movie is, though, told through Mark Rylance's perspective. He is just a really simple guy. He's a thoughtful man. He is very studious. He is very caring for people. He falls for one of the barbarian women at one point and even helps her back to her clan. And pretty much all of that comes back to bite him. Him being a good person at this time of political unrest is not something that is acceptable. And that's the most interesting dynamic that develops, is watching him and kind of putting yourself in his shoes, because you feel like you would do the things that he's doing. But in this extraneous situation, you never really know. And so watching this very good man, Mark Rylance, be tortured, cast out of his house, on the street, it is very biblical in a sense. It has that very biblical characteristic to it.
What did they do to you? Do you want me to take you back to your family?
And the performances here are great. I think they really carry a lot of this movie. Without the themes, without the performances, there isn't a whole lot to get involved with, because there isn't ever like a shootout or someone getting stabbed in front of the camera. There are implied versions of this happening, but there isn't ever an action sequence happening in this movie. It is a very slow, very methodical movie, and without those things, the thematics, the performances, and especially the visuals, this would have fallen on its face, I think. A couple more drafts and maybe a couple more edits would have helped this a lot, because there really isn't that much outside of that to get into. It really is just those performances, the gorgeous cinematography, and the incredibly compelling thematics of the people and the state going to war with each other, essentially, and this Jesus-type character being in the middle of it. Aside from that, it's just like I don't want to say it's forgettable, but in a sense it is, which is very weird. There's a lot I like about it. There's a lot that I would recommend about it. It's just that there isn't enough to say that it's great. There isn't enough going on. There isn't enough that's compelling. There is some. And the stuff that it has works pretty well. It's just that it needed a little bit more oomph to it. It needed a little bit more to get Mark Rylance into the story, because he doesn't ever really get into it. He's not pushed into the story until the last half, when he realizes that the Empire is taking him as a traitor for taking the girl back to the Barbarians. That feels like a second act break, like an act break into two. It feels like the catalyst of the story should have been him taking the girl back to the Barbarians, and then the act break is him succeeding and coming back and realizing that the Empire has taken over his establishment and branded him a traitor. That's sort of the meat of the story, and it only comes at the very end.
We will put down the enemy. that will be the end of it.
So, I don't know. Again, it's hard to explain. I'd probably give it a 7, though. 7 out of 10. Good movie. Recommend if you have the patience for a methodically slow movie that has not much going on. So, yeah. Check it out if you want. I don't know. It's in theaters. You can go to the theater and watch it, so that's kind of fun.